In today's video, we're looking at deadly animals that reacted with lethal force, from a wounded bull shark's fatal strike to a protective tigress's lethal response in the Sundarbans. But first, we start in Louisiana's flooded bayou country, where peak nesting season turned a routine alligator removal into a territorial nightmare. It was May 2018 in the Atchafalaya Basin floodway, a vast network of cypress-studded channels and flooded hardwood forests spanning nearly 1 million acres across south-central Louisiana. Recent heavy rains had pushed water levels higher than normal, transforming familiar hunting grounds into a maze of submerged vegetation and murky channels, where visibility beneath the surface rarely exceeded a few inches. The flooding had displaced countless animals, forcing them into compressed territories along narrow banks and shallow backwaters. Beneath the canopy of Spanish moss and tupelo trees, the slow-moving water concealed an ecosystem built on ambush and patience. The air hung thick with humidity, carrying the scent of decay and wet earth that permeated the entire basin. Benton Cole was 39 years old and had spent multiple seasons navigating these flooded bayous as a licensed nuisance alligator control contractor. His work required him to respond to landowner complaints about aggressive animals, particularly during nesting season, when territorial behavior intensified. Benton was efficient and methodical, preferring to work quickly and move on to the next site. He understood the risks inherent in close-range work with large reptiles, but years of experience had built a confidence grounded in routine. That morning, he and his partner had launched their aluminum skiff into a remote channel after receiving repeated complaints about a particularly large male alligator occupying a narrow stretch of water adjacent to an active nesting area where females had recently constructed egg mounds. The landowner reported that the animal had been displaying heightened aggression, lunging at anything that approached the shoreline. Previous attempts to observe the animal had proven unsuccessful due to the dense vegetation. Peak nesting season had arrived, a period when female alligators construct massive mounds of vegetation to incubate their eggs, and males patrol nearby waters with zero tolerance for intrusion. The recent floods had only amplified this behavior, reducing visibility and forcing both humans and animals into tighter proximity than usual. Benton and his partner navigated slowly through the channel, scanning the banks for signs of disturbance. The water was the color of dark tea, stained by tannins and sediment, making it impossible to see more than a few inches below the surface. They located the reported nesting site along a muddy bank thick with reeds and submerged logs. The plan was straightforward: secure lines, assess the situation, and proceed with removal protocols if necessary. The American alligator is a prehistoric survivor, largely unchanged for millions of years, perfectly adapted to ambush hunting in freshwater environments. Adults can exceed 13 feet in length and weigh over 1,000 pounds, with jaw muscles capable of delivering one of the strongest bite forces ever measured in a living animal. Unlike many predators that rely on pursuit, alligators employ explosive acceleration from concealment, using their powerful tails to propel themselves upward from beneath the surface. During nesting season, male alligators become fiercely territorial, defending established zones against any perceived threat. Their attacks are not acts of hunger but calculated responses to territorial violation. They strike without warning, relying on a combination of brute force, drowning tactics, and a behavior known as the death roll, a violent rotational spin used to subdue prey and tear flesh. The skiff idled alongside the muddy bank while Benton leaned forward over the gunwale, working to clear a line that had snagged on submerged vegetation. His partner maintained position, handling the throttle and watching the surrounding water. The turbidity was worse than anticipated. The water was completely opaque just inches below the surface. Rather than repositioning the boat or using extended tools, Benton made the decision to reach directly into the water near the nesting bank to free the tangled line. His hand penetrated the murk, fingers searching for the obstruction. What he could not see was the massive male positioned directly below, motionless and waiting. The alligator lunged upward with explosive force, jaws erupting through the surface and closing around Benton's forearm with crushing pressure. The strike was instantaneous, offering no opportunity for reaction or withdrawal. Teeth designed to grip rather than slice locked down, and the sheer momentum of the animal's upward trajectory pulled Benton off balance. His body pitched forward over the side of the skiff and into the channel. The water swallowed him immediately, the surface churning as the alligator initiated its primary killing behavior. The death roll began in a violent burst. The alligator rotated its entire body rapidly, turning Benton underwater in quick, disorienting spins. The animal completed several full rotations before pausing, its grip on his arm never weakening. During the pause, Benton remained submerged, held beneath the surface without opportunity to breathe. The sequence repeated, explosive rotations followed by prolonged submersion, then another burst of spinning. Each cycle prevented any chance to surface for air. As the animal turned during one rotation, Benton's trapped arm was wrenched against the submerged gunwale of the skiff. The combined force of his body weight, the alligator's torsion, and the rigid metal edge generating enough pressure to fracture bone. The structural damage was immediate and severe, separating tissue and dislocating joints as the rotations continued in intervals. The pattern persisted over several minutes. Between bursts of rolling, the alligator maintained its hold and kept Benton underwater, the continuous submersion preventing any intake of air. Water flooded his airway during the forced submersions, each pause driving him deeper into oxygen deprivation. His attempts to struggle diminished as consciousness began to fade, his movements becoming weaker with each cycle. The alligator showed no signs of releasing, its instincts governing the duration and intensity of the attack. The prolonged inability to breathe caused his body to eventually stop resisting altogether. Once resistance ceased, the grip loosened incrementally, the animal remaining close to the site rather than abandoning it. The cause of death was drowning, compounded by severe traumatic injuries sustained during the repeated death rolls and forced submersion. Benton's partner immediately activated emergency protocols, but the conditions made immediate intervention nearly impossible. The alligator remained in the vicinity of the nesting site, its defensive behavior unchanged. Recovery operations were delayed by visibility challenges and the confirmed presence of an actively aggressive animal. Area authorities temporarily restricted access to the section of the floodway, and wildlife officials conducted assessments of the site. The incident was classified as a territorial defense during peak nesting season, with environmental conditions contributing significantly to the outcome. Benton's family received notification within hours, and the contractor community throughout Louisiana responded with somber recognition of the inherent dangers present in floodwater work. Local news coverage emphasized the unpredictability of working in flooded environments during breeding periods, when even experienced professionals face elevated risks from animals defending reproductive territories. State wildlife agencies issued renewed warnings about approaching nesting sites during peak season, particularly in areas where flooding had compressed territorial boundaries. While the bayous of Louisiana presented one form of calculated predation, a different danger waited in brackish coastal waters. Mara Knight would soon discover that post-storm conditions at a river estuary created an environment where visibility vanished and predators hunted with relentless efficiency. It was September 2016 at the Umgeni River estuary, where murky freshwater collided with the Indian Ocean along the coast of KwaZulu-Natal, South Africa. Heavy rainfall had pounded the region for 3 days, swelling the river and pushing massive volumes of sediment-laden water into the coastal zone. The runoff carried organic matter and disoriented baitfish, creating a feeding opportunity that drew predators from deeper offshore waters into the shallow estuary mouth. The water was turbid brown-green, visibility reduced to mere inches in the churning mixture of fresh and salt water. As the sun descended toward the horizon, fading light further compromised visibility. Waves broke irregularly across the sandbar where current met incoming swells. Mara Knight was 28, a fitness trainer who spent her free time spearfishing along the South African coast. She had been diving recreationally for several years and considered herself competent in reading ocean conditions. That afternoon, she arrived at the estuary with 2 friends who shared her enthusiasm for spearfishing. The post-storm conditions had concentrated fish in the shallows, and despite poor visibility, the group decided to take advantage of the unusual activity. Her companions remained closer to shore while Mara ventured toward the estuary mouth, where the current was stronger and the water deeper. The decision to dive at dusk following a major storm represented a convergence of risk factors that experienced ocean users typically avoid. Estuaries are natural highways for sharks moving between offshore and inshore feeding zones, and bull sharks in particular exploit these transitional environments. The reduced salinity does not deter them. They are among the few shark species capable of tolerating brackish and freshwater conditions. The turbidity eliminated the primary advantage humans have underwater, the ability to see threats approaching. Mara continued working the channel edge, her spear gun loaded, a stringer of bleeding fish secured to her weight belt. Bull sharks are among the most dangerous predators in coastal waters, ranking behind only great white and tiger sharks in recorded attacks on humans. They are stocky, aggressive, and opportunistic, reaching lengths of 11 feet and weights exceeding 500 pounds. Unlike many shark species that prefer clear water and specific prey, bull sharks thrive in murky environments where their electroreceptive senses compensate for limited visibility. They hunt by detecting electrical impulses generated by muscle contractions and can locate struggling or injured prey from considerable distances. Their bite force exceeds 1,200 pounds per square inch, and their teeth are designed to grip and tear rather than slice cleanly. Bull sharks typically deliver a single forceful bite driven by sensory confusion, then disengage upon recognizing unfamiliar prey. Mara tracked a small grouper along the sandy bottom near the channel edge, the water depth approximately 12 feet. The current pushed against her as she descended, equalizing pressure and scanning the limited visibility ahead. Her finger rested near the trigger of the loaded spear gun as she maneuvered through the surge. In the murky water, she failed to detect a large shape moving parallel to her position. Her trailing spear line snagged momentarily on a submerged obstacle, jerking the gun forward just as her finger made contact with the trigger. The spear discharged into the turbid water, striking a massive bull shark that had approached from her blind side. The spear penetrated the thick hide but lodged only superficially along the flank. The wound was non-lethal, but the sudden pain triggered an immediate defensive response. The shark had been drawn by the scent of blood from the fish on Mara's stringer and the electrical signals of her movements. The impact transformed the situation from investigative approach to direct confrontation. The shark turned abruptly, its body language shifting from exploratory to aggressive. Rather than retreating to the surface and exiting the water immediately, Mara attempted to retrieve the spear, reaching toward the trailing line. The bull shark accelerated from deeper water with explosive speed, closing the distance in seconds. The attack was a single, devastating strike aimed at the lower body. The jaws opened wide, revealing rows of serrated triangular teeth, and clamped down with crushing force across the upper thigh and hip junction. The bite likely severed or catastrophically damaged the femoral artery, along with other major blood vessels, tearing through massive sections of muscle tissue and connective structures. The teeth penetrated deep into the thigh and hip region, causing devastating injury to blood vessels, nerves, and bone. The shark released almost immediately after the initial bite, veering away as surface activity increased and the water filled with blood. Bull sharks typically do not sustain attacks on humans. They bite once to assess whether the target is suitable prey, then disengage when they recognize the unfamiliar composition. But the damage from that single bite was irreversible. Blood poured from the wound in pulsing streams, the compromised femoral artery pumping the body's entire volume into the surrounding water within minutes. Mara surfaced briefly, the buoyancy of her wetsuit bringing her to the top, but the massive blood loss had already begun shutting down vital systems. Her companions saw the disturbance and began moving toward her position, but the distance and current worked against them. Consciousness faded rapidly as blood pressure dropped to unsustainable levels. The body's compensatory mechanisms attempted to redirect remaining blood to vital organs, but the volume loss was too severe and too rapid. Within minutes of the bite, circulatory collapse followed. Mara's body drifted with the outgoing tide, the current carrying her toward deeper water before her friends could reach her. The entire sequence from strike to loss of vital function likely unfolded within just a few minutes. The cause of death was massive hemorrhage resulting from a single catastrophic bite that severed or catastrophically damaged major blood vessels in the lower body. Emergency services were contacted immediately, and a rescue boat launched from the nearby harbor. Mara's body was recovered approximately 20 minutes after the attack, but resuscitation efforts were unsuccessful due to the extent of blood loss. The beach was closed for 72 hours, while authorities assessed the situation and monitored for continued shark presence in the estuary. An investigation by the Regional Marine Safety Board confirmed the attack was consistent with bull shark behavior in post-storm conditions with poor visibility and speared fish present. Mara's family requested no retaliatory action against sharks. The spearfishing community responded with heightened awareness of diving dangers in turbid water during dawn and dusk, and local dive operators began emphasizing the importance of avoiding estuary mouths after heavy rainfall. Where Mara Knight encountered a predator reacting to injury, another environment held dangers rooted in maternal protection. The dense mangrove forests of the Sundarbans would soon demonstrate that Nola Vance faced a far more deliberate threat. A mother's instinct to defend her young, transforming carelessness into a calculated and lethal response. It was March 2015 in the Sundarbans buffer zone, a vast expanse of mangrove forests and tidal waterways straddling the border between India and Bangladesh. This UNESCO World Heritage Site encompasses nearly 4,000 square miles of dense vegetation, intersected by countless channels that flood and drain with the rhythm of the tides. The mangroves grow in thick, impenetrable walls, their roots creating a labyrinth above and below the waterline. Visibility within the cane thickets rarely exceeds a few meters, and the constant rustle of leaves and movement of water masks the sounds of approaching animals. During high tide, much of the forest floor becomes submerged, compressing wildlife movement into narrow corridors of elevated ground and forcing predators and prey into closer proximity than either would normally tolerate. Nola Vance was 32 years old, a wildlife photographer from the United Kingdom who had traveled to the Sundarbans under special permission to document a sanctioned wild boar control operation alongside forest personnel. The region had experienced increased human-wildlife conflict in recent months, with livestock losses attributed to a displaced tigress that had been sighted multiple times near village boundaries. She had joined a team of local trackers who knew the area intimately and understood the patterns of animal movement through the tidal forests. The group had positioned themselves along a tidal creek early that morning, waiting for the outgoing tide to concentrate animal activity along predictable routes. Recent reports indicated that the tigress responsible for the livestock attacks had been moving through the buffer zone with at least one cub, possibly two. Fresh pug marks had been discovered along muddy banks, and partially consumed prey remains suggested the animals were actively hunting within a defined territory. The trackers had warned the group to remain together and avoid entering dense cane without visual contact with at least one other person. High tide that morning had pushed water deep into the forest, and as it began to recede, the compression of usable terrain created ideal ambush conditions. The Bengal tiger is the apex predator of the Sundarbans, a solitary hunter capable of taking down prey many times its own weight. Adult females typically weigh between 250 and 350 pounds, though individuals in the Sundarbans tend toward the smaller end of that range due to the challenging environment and limited prey availability. Tigers are ambush predators, relying on cover to approach within striking distance before launching attacks that can cover 20 feet in a single bound. Their primary killing method involves a bite to the neck or throat, delivered with canine teeth that can exceed 3 inches in length. Jaw pressure is sufficient to crush vertebrae and collapse airways, often combining mechanical damage with asphyxiation. Female tigers with cubs are among the most dangerous animals on Earth, responding to perceived threats with immediate and overwhelming force. The morning had progressed without incident until Nola realized she had dropped a lens cap while repositioning along the creek bank. The item had fallen into a section of dense cane approximately 30 meters from where the trackers had paused. Rather than waiting for the group to move together, Nola made the decision to retrieve the equipment alone. She entered the cane thicket, pushing through the dense stalks that closed behind her, eliminating sight lines in all directions. She located the lens cap within moments and bent to retrieve it. What she did not see were the faint impressions in the mud nearby, small pug marks indicating that a tiger cub had been resting in this exact location less than an hour earlier. The tigress had been tracking human movement from the moment the group entered her territory. She had moved her cub to a more secure location, but remained nearby, monitoring the situation from deep cover within the cane. When Nola separated from the group and entered the thicket alone, approaching the area where the cub had recently rested, the tigress interpreted this as a direct threat. She closed the distance through the cane with absolute silence, her striped coat providing perfect camouflage against the vertical patterns of light and shadow. The attack came from behind, the preferred angle for tigers hunting in dense cover. The tigress launched from less than 10 feet away, covering the distance in a fraction of a second. Her front paws struck Nola's back with overwhelming body weight and momentum, driving her forward and down into the mud. Before any defensive response was possible, the jaws closed around the back of the neck. The canine teeth penetrated deeply, 2 on either side of the cervical spine. The bite was delivered with precision, targeting the gap between vertebrae. Crushing pressure bore down on the cervical vertebrae, fracturing bone and compressing the spinal cord within. The airway collapsed under the force of the bite, cutting off oxygen flow. Major cervical blood vessels, including the carotid artery and jugular vein, were compressed and damaged by the enormous pressure. The combined effects of spinal compression, airway obstruction, and vascular damage began shutting down consciousness. Nola remained aware for several seconds, unable to move or breathe, her body pinned beneath the weight of the predator. The pressure on her neck was absolute and unrelenting. Blood flow to the brain diminished rapidly as the carotid artery collapsed under the bite force. Between 5 and 10 seconds after initial contact, oxygen deprivation and loss of cerebral blood flow pushed her beyond consciousness. The tigress maintained her crushing grip, her body weight preventing any movement. Death followed within the next minute as the combination of spinal trauma, asphyxiation, and vascular collapse proved irreversible. The cause of death was a fatal cervical bite resulting in vertebral crushing, spinal cord compression, airway obstruction, and catastrophic vascular injury. The tigress released her grip and remained motionless for several moments, her breathing controlled, her eyes scanning the surrounding cane. She listened for sounds of approach, assessing whether other threats remained in the vicinity. After nearly a minute of stillness, she gripped the body by the shoulder and began dragging it toward deeper cover, moving in the direction of tidal water, where concealment would be more complete. The behavior was not driven by hunger, but by the instinct to remove threats from the vicinity of her cub. Tigers often cache kills or drag them to secure locations, even when they have no intention of consuming them. The trackers heard the brief disturbance and immediately recognized the sound pattern. They approached cautiously, calling out and making noise to announce their presence. The tigress abandoned the body and retreated into the mangroves, her primary objective achieved. Recovery operations were complicated by the terrain and the confirmed presence of a defensive tigress in the immediate area. Local wildlife authorities were notified, and a team arrived within hours to assess the situation. The incident was classified as a defensive attack by a female protecting cubs, with the victim's separation from the group and inadvertent approach to a cub resting site identified as the primary trigger. Nola's family was notified through the British consulate, and her body was repatriated following completion of the investigation. Area patrols were increased in the buffer zone, and additional warnings were posted regarding the presence of a tigress with cubs using the tidal corridors. Thanks for watching. Want to see more? Click on your screen now.